what I'm planning on doing today is taking and making a leather covered plaster mount for this buck. This is my largest Idaho whitetail I've killed, and we killed him quite a few years ago, and he's been in some different taxidermy situations in his life. It'll look a lot like that guy up there.
Why do we have so much of boy elk here?
Boy deer?
Yeah.
Well, because when we go out we look for bucks, because bucks are fun to look for. They have cool antlers that we get to keep, and it helps us remember the hunt that we were on. We get the meat and we get antlers.
That big hunt?
Do I remember that one?
Yes.
Yes, I do. That one was Daddy's. Daddy shot that out.
I really like that one because
I like that one too.
Almost leaking the roof.
Yeah. We're going to cut out a template out of cardboard in the shape that we want, and then we're going to go cut that out of a piece of wood. So we got to make sure that we have a little bit of room.
And I got real knives.
Around the outside of the skull plate. Get the outside dimensions here. Make sure that we make our template big enough to cover everything. So there's my basic outline. I'm going to take that out to the garage and find a piece of wood that I want to use. Just something that's thin enough where I can screw it to the back of this skull plate. And I'm going to cut it out in that shape. Okay, this right here is a great thing to use as a backer because it's really sturdy, and when you go to screw the skull plate down, it's not going to pop and snap like a piece of pine board could. So I'm going to trace this onto here and then cut it out. Okay, now I've got to screw the skull plate onto this board, and I have to be really careful with mine because my skull plate was broken at one point and I don't want to crack it again. So I'm going to do it carefully. Okay, now comes the messy part. So we're going to mix some plaster up, enough plaster to be able to cover this whole thing and create a nice shape. And it has to be thick enough to be able to work with it and not have it running off, but just that thick, because the thicker you make it, the faster it dries, and you want to be able to work with it for a while and shape it and make sure you get it exactly how you want it. It's nice to not have it start to dry on you too fast. Okay, now while it's still a little bit soft, I just cleaned up my tools. I'm just going to come through here and make sure that the burrs are visible. So if it got a little bit high up here, I'm going to push it off of this. And then I'm going to come here and clean those burrs off a little bit so they're not covered in plaster. We're going to want to have room for the leather or whatever you want to put in there to slip up underneath the burr. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a gap all the way around there. I've let it sit for a couple hours and it's hardened up. It's still kind of wet feeling a little bit, but it's hard enough for me to go ahead and sand it. We're going to sand it down, just smooth out all the rough edges and any spots that are a little bit thicker than I want them to be. going to get a screwdriver and scrape off the stuff on the back so that it's nice and smooth back there. It's just to make sure that it sits nice and flat against the wall. I'm still going to have leather that comes around here, but I don't want to have this added on to the leather. It would just make it really bulky, so. That's the shape that I like. When it comes down to it, you can do any shape you want it. I mean, the only thing to consider when you're coming up with the shape that you want is when you go to wrap it, you can't have too abrupt of corners or you'll end up having a lot of wrinkles in whatever fabric or leather or whatever you go to put over it. You want your angles to be gradual so that you can get that leather or fabric tight and not have a bunch of wrinkles around it. Okay, so here I have my piece of leather. My other one up there is done with the rough side out, but this time I'm going to do it with the smooth side. And basically, there's going to be two seams. I'm going to come down and cut a seam to where these can come around the antlers, and then it's going to have a little seam behind it that goes to the back. So I basically have to mark and figure out how wide it needs to be between here. So we'll measure this. The thing about this is it stretches. So as you're going, you want to make sure that you're counting for stretching it. I'm going to come into these two places at an angle so that the seam goes behind the antlers. It's almost like what you would do if you were caping out a deer. It's the same angle that you come up to the antlers at so that you can end up stretching it around. So we're going to put this right in the middle. Just to start with, we'll get that seam right in the middle. Okay, I've got one staple in the bottom. I'm going to put one staple right here in the top. And we're just going to slowly work our way around here, try to keep it as smooth. This box rack's going to get in the way. Try to keep it as smooth as possible. Okay, it's nice and tight on the nose. We're going to have to trim around here a little bit, but we got to be careful because as we stretch it, it changes. So I'm going to do that part last. Because where it's going to end up stretching, it's hard to tell. So we'll just work our way up to that and then we'll stretch it from there. Okay, see that? It's all stapled on the bottom. Now I'm going to assess this and just trim where I think I'll need to trim. So you trim it, you want to trim it as close as possible, but it doesn't, if it's a little bit outside the edge, it's okay because you're going to cover it up with another trim piece. Just want to trim it up just where I need to. I don't want to do any more than necessary. The nice thing about leather and it being flexible. I'm going to be able to cut that a little bit more. Okay. The flexibility to pull it this way. I just want to try to get the wrinkles out of it as much as possible. You can see where it's binding as you go. Work it around and then staple it down. I want to be able to tuck my end in underneath of this one. About right there, it looks like. See, I'm getting it trimmed down to where I can tuck this underneath that other layer. Pull this over top. Okay, there's that part. And now we'll do a little trim piece around here after we get this part done. So. Okay, so there's our basic wrap. Now we just have to get our little trim pieces cut and put on the top, and we're going to trim off all the excess we have here on the back. Can use that for some fringe for some other project down the road. It's all clean and trimmed up. So I'm going to cut myself a couple of thick strips that'll fit all the way around the antlers, and then we'll go from there. I could have, when I went and did underneath these burrs here, I could have gave myself even a little more room because of putting this trim on there. You kind of need a little extra room under there. So if you go to do one, remember that you got to leave yourself a little bit of room there. I tried to leave myself some, but I could have used a little more. Kind of match up. Don't want them to be too different. So this one was over top. I'm going to make sure we do that the same. Make sure our front is covered, which it is, and it matches nicely. Staple that down. Trim it off. You can see how it looks on the top, how it looks on the back. Just get a hanger for it, and we'll be done. Okay, he's all done. It's all finished. I put a hanger on the back. Now we just got to figure out where to hang him. Yep. And then I got to put a hanger on this guy.
Right next to the bell.
And then we can hang him.
I'll hang him right here. Right there.
You think so?
Yeah. That would look really cool right next to the bell.
Here's the man, the myth, and the legend. The pike master. Where's he gonna go?
It's gonna go right down.
It's up. It looks nice.
You wanna go to the fire now?
The snow finally melted enough to where we can see the fire pit. So we're having a campfire. Feels good.